Hello. I'm sorry. It always takes me just a few minutes to get the camera adjusted and the lighting and all those fun things. I am coming or going to try to record a lecture to go along with chapters 4 through 6 in the health textbook. I want you to take a look at the course competencies. If you would, the lecture notes that are in the folder under lessons, the lessons tab, and then you go to the health unit, and then you click on the next folder would be health chapters 4 through 6, and then that folder will open up all the information for chapters 4 through 6 in the health section. And I know that's a click, but I wanted to try to organize it in a way that will hopefully make sense. Maybe it will. Anyway, the lecture notes are there. It's a Word document file. You will be able to copy it without a problem. You should, especially if you have Word. If you don't, you may not be able to copy it. Sorry about that. But I try to do everything in formats that people can actually use or have access to. But anyway, the notes, the lecture notes, go right along with the YouTube lecture that I'm doing here. I'm going to try not to go word for word, but I do want you to call your attention to the health course competencies at the top of that page. They are all listed, and there are 4 of them for this course. The first 2, I think it seems like we did this backwards. The first 2, number 1, recognize symptoms of common illnesses. And number 2, describe precautions to take in preventing the spread of communicable diseases, including standard precautions. Those are the 2 that we mainly deal with in chapters 4 through 6. And then, like I said, when I was talking about the chapter content in chapters 1 through 3, we covered the health competencies, number 3, and number 4. However, number 3, there is an example. Number 3's competency is identify child care center exclusion policies and procedures. When we talked about that, when we talked about the rules for child care learning centers, the big document that we found on the Georgia DeKalb website, but there's also a sample in the textbook, and it's on page 118, and that's actually in chapters 4 through 6. That's actually in that content. And then there is an example of a form on page 121 that goes with the health competency number 4, which is outline procedures for maintaining health and immunization records and administering prescribed medications. And then there's a sample. Again, it's in the 4 through 6 content. It's page 121, but we also talked about it when we looked at the rules for the child care learning centers in the Georgia DeKalb information that we did with chapters 1 through 3. Some of that information you all were tested on in chapters 1 through 3. In addition, you saw that information when you did the website activity, the assignment 1. Okay, chapter 4 starts out, the title of that chapter is called Caring for Children with Special Medical Conditions. And so first of all, in chapter 4, we're going to talk about common illnesses that we see in children, but these conditions are more special medical conditions, conditions that a child may have to have modifications in their schoolwork. For example, children with disabilities and medical concerns, which this is what we're talking about, and chronic diseases are going to be present in every early childhood classroom, or at least in the early childhood classroom setting. As an early childhood teacher, you you should be able to respond to these children and know how to meet their educational needs, their health needs that are going to be present, and you play a crucial role in identification and treatment, because sometimes, especially in the the early preschool, 3-year, 4-year-old students, even in kindergarten, a lot of times these things that won't show up until that age. Or maybe the parent really is in the process of trying to deal with what's going on with the child. Not really, maybe they don't have a diagnosis yet. Understand, as an early childhood teacher, and this is true no matter what, that every child is uniquely different. It is very important that as you embark on this journey and you continue on to become early childhood teacher, worker, daycare center staff person, however you work with children, whatever type of job you end up doing, make sure you understand that all children are unique and different, and that you need to love children if you are going to work with children. I just think that's important. Students that may need individualized instruction or support that will build on their strengths. We need to understand as early childhood teachers that all children are similar. They all have the same basic needs. We all do. We all have basic need for food, clothing, shelter. We have the need for love, attention, dignity, and respect. But of course our basic needs obviously are food, clothing, and shelter. But then, it goes on to other needs. But we all have those needs. Children have them too. Refer to a child, if you have a child in a setting that has a condition such as asthma, as a child with asthma, instead of, calling their name. It's just a way of referring to them. Know what an IEP is. You've probably heard those initials, especially if you've had children or if you've been around an educational setting. I think I've also told you before that there are a lot of acronyms in education. IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan. There's also an IFSP, which is an Individualized Family Service Plan, and an IHSP, which is an Individualized Health Service Plan. Inclusion, especially if you work in the public school setting from, say, kindergarten on up, you will need to know what the term inclusion means. Inclusion is the practice of including and integrating children of varying abilities and limitations together in the same classroom. And as of 2004, the passage of IDEA, which stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, was passed, and that act means or guarantees children the same right to an appropriate education and the same special services that they need to succeed as their typically developing peers. So it is the law that we are to treat these children as we would their peers and to meet their needs educationally, and in most cases, if they have disabilities, physical disabilities will be fairly obvious. If they have difficulty with vision or hearing, sometimes they're not as obvious early on, but those modifications need to be made. Okay, common chronic diseases and medical conditions is what we're going to talk about mainly in Chapter 4. These are diseases that are ongoing. The first two are not as easy to recognize because they may have been present since birth: diabetes and anemia. Anemia is a blood disorder. It can be a hereditary disorder, such as sickle cell disease, and it's not a disease itself, but a symptom of other conditions. Okay, we talked about, or at least we had, I think it was Shanda, I hope I'm saying your name right. I get Sandra and Shanda. I apologize, ladies. Y'all's names are very similar. But Shanda presented the other night about asthma, and I hope I haven't got that confused too. I haven't looked back over some of that stuff. Very good presentation. All of your presentations were great. You guys did a great job. I learned a lot from you. But one of these ladies talked about asthma and childhood asthma, and asthma is another thing that you will see, another type of disease that's chronic and ongoing that children have to deal with. So are allergies. Allergies, and it seems like she talked about both of them, if I remember correctly. Allergies can be something you ingest, something you eat. It can be something you inhale, something that's in the air. It can be something that's a contactant, something that gets on your skin or gets on your body in some way. And it can be an injectable, which is like a bee sting. There's a condition called anaphylaxis, which is life-threatening. That's when people have a life-threatening reaction to a bee sting, for example, and it can be fatal. An EpiPen is, most of the time, these people that have severe allergic reactions, they keep an EpiPen with them because if they need it, if they get stung or they start having a reaction, the EpiPen is supposed to help slow down the reaction and keep them from going into any type of shock or having the airway closed or, etc. Asthma, started talking about asthma, and then I went to allergies, but back to asthma. It can be an hereditary thing. They're not totally sure, but there are strong hereditary predispositions for asthma. It affects twice as many boys. It is often seen in children who also have respiratory allergies. It is increasing these days, and it's thought to be increasing because of environmental factors such as airborne allergies, secondhand smoke, chemicals, and then early feeding practices can be another thing that can cause asthma. Additionally, asthma can be both chronic and acute. An acute attack of asthma comes on quickly and can be really serious, can get serious, and the child can have needs immediate attention, is what I'm trying to say. I already said it tends to be inherited. I'm restating that, sorry. It may get progressively worse without treatment, and like I said, the incidences of asthma are increasing. I'm going to have to stop with this one and start a new YouTube because I'm getting to the end of time, but I'm going to mention just a few more of these chronic childhood diseases. Children can have lead poisoning, childhood cancers, which is the leading cause of death from disease among children 0 to 14 is cancer. I don't think that's no big shock to us. Eczema, which is a chronic inflammatory skin condition. Children can have excessive fatigue due to sleep apnea and endocrine disorders. And there's more information that's in the textbook about what other conditions can cause a child to have excessive fatigue, but it's not normal for children to be excessively tired. There are seizure disorders and conditions, and then sickle cell disease are the ones that are mentioned in our text. I will do part 2. See you in a little bit.